Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to go through the lesson for number 3 on your checklist, I believe, which is identifying domain and range of a function. Okay, specifically what we want to do, like the objectives say, we want to identify the domain and range from ordered pairs, and we want to identify domain and range from a real-world function. Okay, so you should be taking notes as you're going along, filling this in, hopefully with a pencil. Again, I'm going to use pen because it just shows up better on videos. Okay, let's get started. What domain means is the set of all the inputs of a function, okay? And we're going to think of inputs as the x values, okay? You should remember from middle school, x values and y values. Remember, if I have the point 3, 4, the 3 is my x, the 4 is the y, okay? Every point goes x, y, all right? And the range means the set of all the outputs of a function. And of course, the range is going to be the y values. Okay. All right. So let's try that in an example. So give the domain and range of this set of values, right? So in order to do that, let's write this down. Okay. Range. So the notation we use is we're going to make these brackets, right? And we're going to have to close them at the end when we finish listing the values in our domain and range. Okay. So for the domain, again, domain means the inputs or the x values. So what are the possible x values here? Well, the different x values we have are 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so our domain is just 0. Well, that doesn't look like a 0. There we go, that's a little better. 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and again, we're going to close those brackets. All right, and for the range, again, the range means the set of the y values or the outputs. So the different y values we have are 0, 3, 4, and -8, okay? The values don't need to be listed in any specific order. However, if you have repeated values, like let's say we had 2 of these -8s, we would only list the -8 once, okay? All right, so for example 2, slightly different from example 1. In example 1, we had a set of 4 coordinate pairs. In example 2, we have, which you should remember from the previous lesson, is called a mapping diagram. Okay. So what you might find helpful here is if we convert from a mapping diagram to just a set of coordinate pairs, all right? In order to do that, we're going to take our input, and match it to our output, okay? So if we convert this to coordinate pairs, well, 1 gives me 5, which means we have the value 1, 5. 2 points to 7, so we have 2, 7. And the last one is 3, 7. Okay. So now we have enough information to write out the domain and range. domain. All right, again, we're going to use those brackets. So the domain, we're looking for the different possible inputs or x values. Well, that's just 1, 2, and 3. The range, we're looking for the different possible y values or outputs. So we have 5, 7, and another 7. Remember that since we have a repeated value, we're only going to use it once. So my range is going to be just 5, 7. Okay. What I'd like you to do at this point is pause the video, go take a minute and try example 3. Welcome back. All right, so what you should have done here is, like we did in example 2, write out a list of coordinates. Okay, so the coordinates we have are 2, 2, 4. We have 4, 2, 8, 11, and lastly 9, 1. Okay. So now we're ready to write out the domain and range. So domain, again, we're looking for the different inputs. Those are 2, 4, 8, and 9. For the range, we're looking for the different outputs. So we got 4, 2, 11, and 1. Okay. And that's your answer for example 3. Okay. So what we want to do next is we want to extend our knowledge of domain and range to look at something like example 4. Okay. Example 4 is definitely more involved than the previous ones. Okay, so it says Ashley is a software saleswoman. Let P be Ashley's total pay in dollars. So let N be the number of copies of History is Fun that she has sold. Ashley has 130 copies available to sell. Suppose that P equals 10N plus 2400. Let's write that down off to the side. Okay. And I'm going to make a note of what P and N stand for here. So P here is total pay. I'm just going to make a little note next to it. Pay in dollars. Okay. And N is the number of copies of History is Fun that she sold. So next to N, I'm just going to write number copies. Okay. Let's see what else. And so the formula is probably the most important piece of information in the problem. And this piece of information over here where it says Ashley has 130 copies available to sell, that's going to wind up being important as well. Okay. So it says identify the correct description of the values in both the domain and range of the function, then for each choose the most appropriate set of values. Okay. And by the way, as you can probably tell when you're doing this online, this is going to be like a pull down menu of multiple choice options, but for these notes, we're actually going to come up with the answers ourselves. Okay, so we have to give a description of the domain and range, what they mean, and their possible values. All right, so for domain, we know from above that domain means input. Okay, so what you have to know, this formula tells us how much pay, how much money she's going to get when she sells a certain number of copies. Well, what's the input here? You have to ask yourself, does pay tell you the number of copies, or does number of copies tell you the pay? Well, the only scenario here that would make sense is that the number of copies, the amount of books she sells, tells you the number of pay. Obviously, if she only sells a few books, she's only going to make a little bit of money. If she sells a lot of books, she's going to make a lot of money, okay? So P here is going to be the output, and N here is going to be the input, all right? So for domain, we're talking about input, all right? So we know N is the input, and N stands for the number of copies. So that's what choice we're going to select there. All right. Set of values. Here we're looking at what are the possible values of N, or in more practical terms, what different values could N take on? Well, see that underlined sentence? Ashley has 130 copies available to sell. If you think about what that means, she's got 130 copies probably in a warehouse somewhere. And if we consider how many books she could possibly sell, well, what are the fewest amount of books she can sell? She doesn't necessarily have to sell anything. Maybe no one wants to buy her book, right? So the smallest value in the domain is going to be 0, all right? Well, we also want to think about what is the largest number of books she can sell. If she has 130 copies available to sell, maybe she'll sell out. Maybe she'll sell all of them. So our set of values is going to be 0 to 130 for the domain, okay? Now, when you're doing this online, the answer choice is going to say something along the lines of like all real numbers from 0 to 130. I don't really think it's necessary, but that's the way that the program does it, okay? All right, so for range, again, for range, we're looking for the output. We know our output is P. What does P stand for here? Well, P stands for the total pay. So we're going to check that off, okay? To find the possible set of values for her pay, we're going to have to use this formula, right? So we want to know, well, what is her smallest possible pay? What's the smallest possible amount of money she could make? Well, how's that going to happen? That's going to happen when she sells the smallest amount of books, or 0. So we're going to have to use this formula over here to determine what's the smallest amount of money she could make. So if 0 books, all right, we have the formula P equals 10N plus 2400. Now we're going to substitute in 0 for N because we're looking at the scenario in which she sells no books at all. So that's going to be 10 times 0 plus 2400, which of course is just 2400. Okay, so the smallest value in the range is 2400, right? Now, how are we going to find the largest value in the range? Well, we're going to use the largest value in the domain. We want, in more practical terms, we want to know, well, the amount of money that she makes is going to range from when she sells 0 books to when she sells 130 books. So 2400 is like her worst case scenario. Her best case scenario, where she sells out of books, where she sells all 130, we have to know how much money that's going to get her. So let's make another column. If 130 books, so again, our formula P equals 10N plus 2400. Okay, so I'm going to substitute for N 130, 10 times 130 plus 2400, which comes out to, this is going to be 1300 plus 2400 makes $3,700. So our answer for the set of values for the range is going to be 2400 to 3700. Okay. These kind of questions are a little tricky. They definitely take more work than the first three examples. All right, let's turn the page. Let's have you pause the video and try example 5 on your own, and I'll come back and show you the solution. Okay, let's go over the question. So it says a small publishing company is planning to publish a new book. Let C be the cost of publishing the book in dollars. Let N be the number of copies of the book produced. For the first printing, the company can produce up to 200 copies of the book. That's going to be important. Up to, sorry about the phone. Up to 200 copies of the book. Okay, and then we have this formula. C equals 20N plus 600. Let's do it like we did before. C equals. Sorry, it's a little hard to hold my phone and write at the same time. All right, and C here stands for cost. Let's make a note of that. N stands for number of copies. Okay. So, cost is going to be the output. N here is going to be the input. Okay. So for domain, we're looking for input. That's going to be N, and N stands for the number of copies produced. Okay. And then, what else do we know about number of copies? Well, the sentence we underlined is the company can produce up to 200 copies of the book. So what's the smallest amount they can print? 0. What's the largest amount? 200. Okay. For the range, we're looking for output. That's going to be C, or the cost. And for the values of the output, we need to know what's their cost of making 0 books. So if 0 books, C equals 20N plus 600, so that's going to be 20 times 0 plus 600. 20 times 0 is just 0, of course, so that gives us 600. Okay, so the smallest value in the range is 600. Let's get our largest value in the range. That's going to occur when the domain, or the number of copies, is 200. So if 200 books, okay, we start with the formula. C equals 20N plus 600. So that's going to be 20 times 200 plus 600. 20 times 200 is 4,000. Plus 600 gives us 4,600. Okay. So for the range, it's going to go from 600 to 4,600. Okay. So when you're doing this online, you're going to look for an answer choice in the pull-down menu that says something like all real numbers from 600 to 4,600. Okay, I think that's where I will stop.